starting around like the early 1970s, scientists started taking notice of something when they were sort of out doing their field research, which seemed a bit weird. They were finding frogs that looked kind of like this. Um, and if you find something dead when you're out on a walk, maybe you'll poke it with a stick for a couple of minutes or something, and then you'll kind of move along. But it wasn't weird that this was happening. It was weird that there were loads of these, like, in one pond. Everything would just be completely decimated. Um, and so they started documenting these, and then as that happened and people started talking to each other, they realized that actually this was much more widespread than any one isolated incident. Um, so yeah, they wanted to investigate more. So in 1998, scientists discovered Batrachochytrium dendrobatitis, which is also known as BD here. And in 2007, this was linked to what's called chytridiomycosis, which is the condition that ends up leading to amphibians sort of developing those symptoms that you've seen previously. So a little bit about BD. It's got kind of two life stages. It sort of starts out, so in part A, it starts out as a flagellated zoospore. It kind of can, go around in the water. And then it has this other static sporangium stage where it reproduces, then pushes out more flagellated zoospores, and then it kind of just goes around in circles. So, and the thing is, if you're a frog and this gets on you, it sucks, right? Because frogs breathe through their skin. So having a load of stuff that's kind of like living on you kind of makes it difficult to breathe. And then things get progressively worse, and then they die. So, and then after you're dead, BD still lives on your skin and sort of like can infect other frogs in the pond. Also other animals recently discovered, which is quite weird. But anyways, so you're probably wondering, like, how did this happen, right? Because it's like all over the place. How does a pathogen like this kind of get like really into some quite remote places in the world? So there are two kind of hypotheses about this right now. The first is the novel pathogen hypothesis, which is essentially that BD is kind of a recent phenomenon. It's kind of just arrived on the scene, and yeah, it's a new thing. Whereas the endemic hypothesis is that it's always been around, but there have been other environmental factors that have kind of been keeping it at bay. And most people at the moment believe in the novel pathogen hypothesis. And here's one example. This is Xenopus laevis, also known as the African clawed frog. And Xenopus laevis is a bit interesting in a couple of ways. One is that it's not really affected by BD. It can like get it on it, but it doesn't really care that much. But the bigger thing is that it was actually used for pregnancy tests before pregnancy tests were a thing. So you would inject urine into a frog, and if it laid eggs, that meant that you were pregnant. But then when pregnancy tests came around, like, Xenopus laevis was out of a job, so people just kind of like dumped them in the local pond, and they've become an invasive species all over the US and a lot of other places as well. Similarly, this is Rana catesbyana. This is the American bullfrog. And this is, if you've ever had frog legs before, anybody, this is what you've eaten probably. But the problem is that, lots of people like to eat these, right? So then you end up with these big, huge farms where you've got loads and loads of frogs kind of all living on top of each other. And the Rana catesbyana as well is not affected by BD, but they're reservoirs for it. And again, they're also invasive, and they've escaped, and their wastewater kind of adds more of this pathogen. There's no current treatment for BD, at least not one that's really viable in the wild, obviously, because there's so many factors. But one of the big things is trying to, I guess, use microbes that exist on other frogs that have been resistant, and trying to like figure out a way to kind of cultivate that in a way to make it accessible for frogs. I'm pretty sure I'm almost done, but yeah, basically there's some stuff about what the current state of things is, but we've missed that. We can go back to it. It's fine.
All right, that was amazing. Thank you. Let me see. Cool. So at this time, we'll start in on approximately 5 minutes of Q&A. This time I know how to distinguish a clap from a raised hand. So yay. Does anyone want to start with any questions? Let's see. Let's start with Alina.
Hi, thank you. What the hell are you talking about that they injected urine into them and then they laid eggs? Why did that happen? What the fuck?
I mean, it's just I mean, I didn't make the rules, man. This is just how things go.
Chaz, just do you know?
I have a hypothesis.
Can I hear it?
Okay, so mating in general has some common hormones from species to species. And so I imagine that some of the hormones present in pregnant women that are not present in unpregnant women are likely shared or have a similar molecule shape to the hormones that either are released or cause a female frog to lay eggs. That is my hypothesis.
Thanks.
I always heard that they injected it into a rabbit and the rabbit died.
Don't know anything about
You
that.
never heard that one?
I never heard that one.
Yeah, in the 50s, the pregnancy test was injected into the rabbit died.
Right.
Should we just be injecting pregnant women's urine into everything and seeing what happens?
I mean, why not?
Good luck getting funding.
All right, I'm not sure if that counted as one complete question or not. Thanks. Why don't we move on to Chaz?
Okay, so with regards to the frog species that aren't really bothered by BD, does it still grow on their skin, or is it entirely incapable of living on their bodies?
No, it does grow on their skin. So like for Xenopus, for the African clawed toad, they actually have like quite a mucousy sort of. They're just quite mucousy toads, frogs, and so so BD kind of it's always sort of a suppressed reaction. It doesn't get there's basically a count that if you have over 10,000 sporangium on you. As a frog, then you pretty much always die. And so what these other frogs that are experiencing is they sort of have a much more suppressed, it's kind of like a better balance that allows them to kind of survive and not really be too affected by it.
Okay, so they have like different survival factors that prevent the disease from reaching critical mass, or just
Correct.
allow them to breathe around it.
Sorry, what was the
or just
bit?
allow them to breathe around it.
No, it's definitely more the first one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Jacob. Oh, you're muted. If you click on the lower
Got it. Hi. Sorry. What's up? So you mentioned that the general consensus on this was that it was a novel condition instead of an endemic condition. Was that attributed to the African frogs getting released into the wild and it starting there? Or was there another reason why they thought it was novel?
So I think the thing was, so it's a few things, right? So one was African frogs being able to, because essentially before the reason why it was discovered, right, was that there were a bunch of frogs dying. So when they found out that Xenopus actually could harbor BD but not die, they kind of, it's a bit of, you can kind of, there's a bit of a suspect thing, right? And you think, okay, well maybe it's been around in Africa for a while, right? And so then that became sort of the origin story. Everybody was saying it was Africa for ages, and then In early last year, a big study that was published in Science has actually said that it's actually Asia is the place where they think it all started really, because they found like a place of really hyper diverse BD strains that are in South Korea. And so again, it's sort of the same thing where there's a lot of frogs there that can harbor the pathogen in sort of low enough numbers that it doesn't affect them really. And so that's the new kid on the block, as everybody's saying. It's Asia.
Huh. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Chris.
Yeah, so the researchers are finding frogs dead in the ponds the researchers visit. Is it possible that the researchers are spreading it on their shoes the way cavers spread white-nosed bat syndrome?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, that's definitely a big thing. And there's sort of a lot of mitigation factors that scientists have to undergo now. And previously they weren't really doing that. There's definitely a thing where BD was found in the Sierra Nevadas, and the worry is that there are people, maybe like scientists doing research up there, that actually brought it to the Sierra Nevadas previously. But there's a lot of like sanitation and stuff that, at least, but when I was studying this previously at San Francisco State, where we had to make sure that we sanitized all of our gear, and they even had it at the start of walking past, like in Point Reyes and stuff. There's like a little like sort of bath that you step in. That's like in the parking lot, and so you come and go, and you make sure you step in it to kind of sterilize your boots.
Cool.
Seems like
Thank
that
you.
should be tested by visiting new ponds now and seeing if they don't get infected.
Yeah.
So we just hit 5 minutes of questions. I do see that Sonia still has her hand up. Hosts, can you give me should we do one more question?
Yeah.
Let it ride.
Cool. All right, Sonia, you're our last question for the official Q&A portion.
Okay. Is some of the idea that would there be any chance that our use of antibacterial widely in the environment might have an effect also on how well this infection might be battled by other things that would normally live on the skin of an amphibian?
Do you mean that like because like humans are pervasive in sort of like sanitizing ourselves, that we're killing a lot of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, right? I mean, I think it's again, the thing that was odd about this was that it was sort of there were tons of places that were really remote, cloud forests and stuff, that were sort of seeing this goat pass through it. And so you would think there's probably not a lot of hand sanitizer in the cloud forest, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sure, I don't know. Maybe.
Cool.
All right, well, thank you guys for that. Thank you, Nate, very much for presenting and answering lots of questions. At this point, we can take 5 minutes we'll take 4 minutes to go do what you gotta do. So we'll come back at hour 55. And if you wanna ask more questions, go for it, as long as Nate doesn't disappear too. And then we'll hear from our final speaker, Gabriel, about houseplants. Okay, Nate, I actually have a question, but this might just be my non-biologistness asking this. So if we're injecting pregnant women's urine into frogs and they're spawning, does that mean that so spawning would be either shooting out eggs or sperm, right? And
eggs. Yeah, eggs.
Okay, so does that mean that their eggs have some kind of human DNA in them?
No, I think they're just pushing basically they're just dropping their eggs out.
Oh, okay.
Chaz seems very stoked on this.
Well, it's a very, very weird thing.
I did a little bit of research.
Yeah.
Whoever's hypothesis on hormones that sprouted that out early actually sounded fairly reasonable.
Okay, so I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that pregnant women so when a fetus begins growing after it's after it becomes a zygote, the cells around it start secreting a hormone called HCG, which basically tells the uterus to prepare for a pregnancy. So it tells it to start producing progesterone, start like increasing blood flow and thickening the lining of the uterus and stuff. And so the outside of the HCG molecule, the part of it that actually binds to receptors and stuff, is identical to a molecule, to a hormone. I don't remember the name of the hormone, but its abbreviation is LH. And in animals, especially mice and
The
frogs,
love hormone.
right? In mice and frogs, that the LH hormone that HCG is functionally identical to also tells their sexual organs, both ovaries and testicles, to start preparing for either pregnancy or mating. And so with the frogs,
Get ready.
the pregnant woman's urine has the hormone that her cells are producing from reacting to the fetus, right? And those hormones entering the bloodstream of the frog tell the frog's sex organs, hey, you're pregnant. So it starts laying eggs.
Ah, okay. So they're not going to be like little princess frog princes coming out.
Sadly, no.
I thought there was finally a scientific backing to that fairy tale.
Only.